Fire Emblem is a series deeply loved by many. It currently has 16 mainline series games dating back to the first release in 1990. It's no secret that there are tons of beloved characters in this little over 30-year-old series. Over these years, Fire Emblem has introduced a small cast of just a couple of, over 600 playable characters.
In a series that is centered on war and the always present threat of permadeath, it's hard to believe that such an enormous cast could produce such beloved characters, especially since many of the characters don't get more than a couple lines in any game's storyline.
There is one important feature that helps you learn more about the characters that are not central to the story. We are, of course, talking about the supports mechanic.
Supports are a series of conversations between two characters that flesh out more about each character over a playthrough. Supports have gone through multiple iterations, but some things remain constant since they were introduced in the third game, such as units earning a small bonus when close to each other.
Supports started as just minor boosts for characters to add a little bit of additional flavor, but they evolved into something that has damn near become a staple mechanic to define the world and characters in each game. There's a lot to dig in with these seemingly small features, so today Epholo and I are going to review the history of the supports mechanic, including this feature's various iterations, what changes they have undergone, and each system's objective banes and boons.
Supports first came to light in FE2, Guide, on the NES, though perhaps not in a way you'd expect. They're very limited, very primitive. In fact, there's only one in the whole game. It's between Alma and Celica. This one gives a small crit boost to both of the aforementioned units, as long as they're standing adjacent to each other. Though of course, due to the way the game works, the game could easily be played without ever learning about this mechanic. Perhaps this was somewhat of a prototype for what would later follow.
After Fire Emblem Gaiden played around with the idea of units gaining bonuses from fighting nearby units that they would care about, FE3 took it to a whole new level. This game introduced bond supports. These bond supports would result in units receiving small combat bonuses from fighting near units that they would have some sort of connection to. Examples of these units that may receive bonuses would be Marth and Sheeta, Cain and Abel, and so forth. Units that would have a reason to care for each other. Generally, the bond supports offer a small boost to hit, crit, and avoid, and in Thrace's 7076, dodge, meaning critical avoid. On the topic of Fire Emblem 5, it shares new Mystery Emblem system, only adding, as I said, the dodge as an extra bonus. But alas, there are no conversation involved in these first 5 games that offer that juicy characterization we crave. Going back one game to FE4, Genealogy of the Holy War, this fan favorite took a step forwards and backwards in a sense, landing right back where we started. This game features bond supports, but in a rather peculiar way. As many may be aware, this game featured marriage and familial bonds as a big theme throughout its game. Thus, units who are lovers or units that are siblings gain support bonuses with each other in the form of a 20% critical boost while standing adjacent to each other. This is called a combination bonus, and is quite different from either of the types of supports we've discussed thus far. Only a plus 20% critical chance doesn't sound like much, but it's actually huge. See, you can't naturally crit in FE4 without having the critical or wrath skills, or of course having the combination bonus.
Now, on to the Game Boy Advance era of Fire Emblem. This features Fire Emblem the Binding Blade, Fire Emblem Blazing Sword, and Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones. All of these games share a support system, and this support system is likely the most well known as it has laid the foundation for games that came later down the line. Supports in these games are simple. You have your units stand next to each other for a set amount of turns between each pair, and eventually they gain a support conversation, 1 per map to a maximum of 5 per unit. As for combat bonuses, this support system uses affinities, and each affinity grants a different bonus. All units need to do to activate the bonuses of these supports, once the supports have been gained of course, is to stand within 3 spaces of their support partners. Perhaps the most important part of this system, however, is that the characters are given the opportunity to put themselves on display in a way that they wouldn't be able to in the main story. There is of course no guarantee that the characters will still be alive in the main story, so the writers cannot write them into the story with the certainty that they will be there. Supports like these open a whole new window into the lives and personalities of the characters, and this adds so infinitely much to the game. No longer do you have to go through the whole game without seeing your favorite unit speak a single line, never knowing what secrets they could be holding. You as a player would never be able to find out about things such as, say, Marissa, your otherwise edgy-looking sword girl, who is actually quite clumsy and socially awkward. Or take for example Geitz, a random warrior as far as gameplay goes. You are able to find out that he is actually the son of a merchant, and the brother to a character that you may remember from the previous game. And he only fights because he cannot find meaning in life through any other outlet. It's no wonder they elected to bring back these conversations in future games. They're simply too valuable and fun not to have.
Fire Emblem 9 and 10. The Tellius games each have their own spin on the support system. The first being Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. FE9 is very similar in structure to the GBA games, carrying over the ranked formula from before, and even introducing some new affinities. However, unlike the GBA games, you don't build supports by being next to each other on the battlefield. Instead, as long as two people who have a potential support are deployed on the map, they will gain support points. After a set amount of chapters with the pair, they will be able to increase their support rank. This makes getting supports feel less grindy while still keeping what makes the GBA support so great. Another thing introduced in FE9 is supports taking place at the base. One thing that was kind of jarring in the GBA games was the supports taking place mid-battle. These lengthy conversations didn't really make much sense in the middle of battle, but the supports in FE9 take place at the base outside of battle. Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn is a very unique game in many ways. One such way is the support system being greatly simplified. For one thing, you can only build a support with one pair of characters. For example, if Soth and Micaiah are supporting each other, then Micaiah can't support with anyone else, just Soth. Another change is that Radiant Dawn doesn't have long conversations. In fact, Radiant Dawn doesn't even have any support conversations at all. The reason being most likely that you have seen most of the characters' personalities in the previous game, and the fact that Radiant Dawn has such a large cast of characters. All of this does have the side effect of making it so none of the characters really gain any characterization from their supports. Some people like how fast the supports are in these games because they don't care about reading the supports and just want the bonuses. But the shorter supports in Radiant Dawn take away from the characterization of the new characters. And for those who don't like the supports, every game gives you the option of skipping the conversation by pressing the start button.
The DS era of Fire Emblem games, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and Fire Emblem New Mystery of the Emblem, returned to the olden days of their predecessors. These games, most unfortunately, do not feature support conversations, with one little caveat. Fire Emblem 12 characters all have the more standard supports that you may be used to, but only with the avatar character. This is rather unfortunate, but in a game with a cast of over 75 characters, it is understandable that they didn't write out supports between every potential pair. Similarly to Fire Emblem 3 and 5, these games' supports are in the form of bond supports. Every character in the game receives a small boost to hit and avoid and sometimes crit and dodge depending on which characters they stand within 3 spaces of, just like the GBA games. Support bonuses in these games, additionally, do grow, though you can never see it for yourself in a menu or anything of the like. Similarly to the Tellius games, support bonuses grow between units depending on how many maps they have been deployed together. The only major exception in these games is Marth. While Marth does have his own partners to give him boosts, it is worth noting that he himself gets a small bonus to hit and avoid to every single unit in the game, provided that they are within 3 spaces of him.
Lastly, we end our journey with the modern versions of supports. The 3DS era and 3 houses. Starting with Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates. These were the first games since Genealogy of the Holy War to have a marriage and children system. The supports have a classic C to A rank, but now with a special S rank. When a mommy and daddy love each other very much, they reach an S rank support and get married. This will result in the pair having a child depending on who's the mother, and in Fates, who's the father. This adds some pretty cool features to the gameplay, like receiving larger combat bonuses than A-rank supports, receiving higher stat buffs, and an Awakening gives you a higher chance that your units paired a partner to have a dual strike. It also lets you plan out the best builds for children. However, with this many supports, it also takes away from the quality of the writing in the supports. In order for you to plan out different child builds, this means that almost every male and female character need to have a support together, and they have to end with the S-rank support with them falling in love. This introduces many different problems for the writers. They are forced to write a support with characters that probably wouldn't normally interact or need support written. In the GBA games, let's take Deke and Klein. These two have a conversation because their backgrounds are intertwined. Klein was a young noble who was watching gladiator fights when he fell in, and Deke chose to risk his life to save him. In Fates, there are over 20 conversations about how much Camilla loves Corn that ends up with Camilla marrying said person. Now, I'm not saying the 3DS supports are bad. In fact, there are some really, and I mean really great written supports in the 3DS game, such as Xander and Leo, one of my favorites. but most of the good ones get drowned out by the abundance of not so good ones that the writers have no choice but to make. Mechanically, the 3DS supports are very similar to the GBA games. Much like the GBA games, the characters build supports when next to each other, but differ slightly. In the GBA games, you get support points by ending your turn next to the supporting unit. In the 3DS and Beyond games, you gain support points by taking action next to units such as fighting, healing, or dancing.
Next we move on to the currently most modern era of Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia and Fire Emblem Three Houses. The supports in these games are quite similar to the supports as they were in Awakening and Fates. The major differences are that there are no child units or marriages achieved with an S-rank support, and Three Houses gives you an abundance of ways to increase your support points, such as through conversation, tasks, tea parties, and so on. Shadows of Valentia took the supportless base of Fire Emblem Gaiden and brought the existing cast, otherwise without personality, to life in a way that can only be achieved through the support mechanic. In terms of gameplay, supports work the same as the GBA era of Fire Emblem. That is to say, bonuses are given while standing within 3 spaces of support partners, and uniquely to this game, some units even give debuffs to units depending on supports. Three Houses, on the other hand, changes the formula for giving bonuses ever so slightly. In this game, the bonuses are only given if both supporting characters are within range of the same enemy. This makes supports as a gameplay mechanic feel more tactical and more meaningful, especially in maddening mode, where you need all of the help you can get with hit rates. There are minor problems with the way these systems roll, however. Shadows of Valentia was criticized because fans felt there weren't enough supports between the characters, whose lives were now abundantly lively and deserving of more conversation. Each character only had 1 to 3 supports, barring Celica with a more traditional 5 supports. The problem with Three Houses supports is more in the gameplay. Gaining the combat bonuses that supports give is generally restrictive to gameplay and often inconvenient for the player compared to past systems. Additionally, these games generally only give bonuses to hit and avoid, making them a lot more boring compared to older games, which would give bonuses to crit and crit avoid. Three Houses somewhat remedy the issues that Echoes had, and does have a very large number of supports, but even still not as many as Awakening and Fates had, despite many of the characters having so much more life. However, being limited in this way leads to a lot more of the supports being written in a more meaningful way, like the GBA era supports. There are some supports that are just gags, and there are some supports that are simply there because certain units are in the same house and need to have supports for gameplay purposes, and for the purpose of fleshing out relations between characters that would likely be interacting on a daily basis within the game's world.
That has been the history of the support mechanic. They started out as cool small bonuses to characters and a bit of attention to detail for the units that in-universe would have a strong bond. However, over time, they became an essential tool for the writers to flesh out characters without much of a spotlight, and became a very fun and rewarding bonus for the player.
Fire Emblem is all about using your favorite characters, and of course, strategy. Supports benefit both of these, and that's why modern Fire Emblem has made them a staple mechanic.
As for my opinion, I feel as though the modern Fire Emblem games do a good job with supports for the most part, and I feel like all intelligent systems really need to do is strike a good balance between the amount of supports not having too many or too little.
I think GBA Fire Emblem has done the best to date. I like being able to proc supports as soon as I like, and get the immediate bonuses in combat as a result. This also makes it so that you as a player don't need to wait the entire game to read any supports you would like. However, I respect what Tellius went for in that it made them more accessible, so there's no real need to grind them out. My favorite part of both of these systems is that they have affinities, which I find to be magnificent both in their implementation and in the way bonuses are distributed.
We'd love to hear what your opinion on supports are. What's your favorite iteration of them? Or what would you do to make them better? I've been ZipColdPeas from GBR channel.
And I have been Epholo8.
And we'll see you guys next time. Oh, also don't forget to like